Good morning, everybody. I'm going to start with this gentleman to my immediate left, and I'm not going to get his name wrong. What are your thoughts on the subject matter of bridging the divide? Has the divide been bridged? What are the next steps, and what can we do in this respect?
Thank you very much for the question. I think the next steps is we have to see that we are in a huge consolidation of breaking the traditional banking into the modern banking. And traditional banks, we understand, will become more fintechs, and fintechs will become more banks. So the traditional banking, when I started banking in 1987 in Germany, we started in a branch having still a typing machine and a standard phone. So when we see today where we are with the technology, we are going in the next 10 to 20 years, less than this, in a way that the traditional banks we know today, we have the branches, they will be all closed. It will be only online banking. Physical cash will be removed in the next couple of 5 years. You will have only your wallet to pay. Already we see today, we make payments with the phone. We make payments with our Apple Watches or any digital watches. So this journey will continue. And of course, we will use all the technologies we have in place. It will enhance it from AI to algorithms as well, which is especially very important into tradings we discussed before.
I think that's something a lot of us are aware of in terms of what fintech is doing actual to the classical banking regime. And you mentioned the closing of locations, and that raises the question of the masses that cannot access the now closed locations, and those persons who may not in fact have devices like cell phones. How are those persons going to be impacted, and how does fintech sort of improve their experience?
I think, as I said, the traditional banks will be gone and new businesses will come over the place, like advisory firms, consultancy firms, who will serve rich people, high net worth individuals, how to bank today. Today, when you are a rich person having 20, 30 million, you have at least 10 banks. How a rich person will go into the different app and into a different platforms to check on his funds and how to trade. So that's why he would definitely start to join family offices or advisory firms, consultancy firms in order to get his banking done. And we have already seen in Dubai or in other parts of the world that branches are getting closed in banks, physical banks, and we become more in a virtual zone. And there are a lot of virtual banks now available where you cannot just come and knock on the door.
Diota, what are your thoughts on this subject in terms of these larger successful banks leveraging the underserviced?
Yeah, so I think bridging a gap defines it. It depends on whose gap are you bridging, right? So I think I totally agree with the statements from Kasim, where fintechs are becoming banks and banks are becoming fintechs. But what we're seeing from my part of the world, where the underbanked population is still 77%, cash is used more than 80% of the time, credit penetration is less than 15%. You see the roles of banks and fintechs trying to onboard these people, right? So the complexities of a wealthy gentleman or wealthy lady having 10 banks is a problem for the top 1%. But from where I come from, the 80, 90% of the population requires a very simple solution, right? However, I also agree that creating branches is also not the way to go, because it requires a lot of assets, a lot of OPEX. So what do we do, right? So in this day and age, when you want to make things more efficient, you collaborate, right? So in the previous panel, it was mentioned, you got to stick to what you're good at. So banks are good at getting deposits, making sure disbursing good quality loans, right? Fintechs are good at taking alternative data sets and trying to reach a population that was initially unreached by banks. However, learning from bad loans, something that in most markets, banks are governed, right? You cannot reach a certain non-performing loan limit, right? But what else is there? So from where I come from, there's a 7-Eleven equivalent called Alphamart. They have 20,000 locations across Indonesia. They have cashiers. They have cash management issues. So what we do with them is, okay, so we got them on board as our investor, and we told them, look, people transact with you on a day-to-day basis. We're talking about like sachet purchases, right? They go every 2 days, every 3 days, buy small amounts of groceries. So number one, you have a cash management issue. How about we solve that for you? Because most of the people that bank with us needs a outlet to take money out, right? To withdraw money. So instead of going to an ATM, instead of going to a branch, you can go to your stores. And typically these people withdraw when? Not in the morning, but at night after work, right? So, and that's when the cash is most full in these cashiers, right? So we collaborate with them for cash deposit, cash withdrawal. And the last part is having this transaction information. So the previous panel said it's not only what you see in the bank, the money's in and out, but also what they transact, right? But these are like day-to-day transactions where we can underwrite. So eventually what we want to do is we want to get them to move from cash to digital, i.e. using a bank account. Not necessarily crypto yet, but once we got them digital, then we want to give them a loan. Because otherwise, what are their options? It's either no loans whatsoever or, loan sharks, right? Which charge 100, 200, 300% per year, which is unimaginable.
So from your perspective, bridging the gap requires collaboration, and it's going to be the collaboration of classical banking and actually the fintech sector.
100%. And again, we have to make sure that we address the problem, right? It's not enough to look cool, right? It's not enough to say, oh, we're using AI to do this and this and this. Yes, but whose problem are you solving? They really need AI right now? If they do need AI, what kind of AI, right?
Indeed, we have different jurisdictions worldwide, and in your jurisdiction, it's still different than in jurisdictions, let's say in Europe or in Germany or in Switzerland. So in Europe, we see a full digitalization. Also, I think in the Middle East, we're starting to see that even in the UAE, where we go into a less cash management business. Asia, yes, it's still cash healthy, but that is, I think, a question of the journey. And there is a lot to do. And I think in the next 10 years, you will be the same like we see it in Europe.
Yeah.
The cash management will be definitely going down. We have seen in the UAE, 40% of branches has been closed. We have seen in Europe completely closed most of the banks. So I think this journey will happen also in Asia.
Yeah, 100% with you.
Yes.
It's just that we have to make sure that we get their cash before the cash goes away.
Exactly.
Amran, I think for this particular topic, your expertise is going to be really useful. How do you think not only this collaboration, but bridging the divide via collaboration and other examples, alternatives, is going to solve the problems for the lower middle income persons? What are the benefits they're going to get from this?
Thank you, Prescott, for the question, and very good morning to the audience. So I come from a country which is the Silicon Valley for social business. It's called Bangladesh. And in the school of Fintech, we are still at the kindergarten. And we are still learning. And it's just in 2024, we have the mandate of going into digital banking. So you can understand how many areas we are behind. And having said that, we have a population of 160 million. Out of that, 60 million are still unbanked. So those of you who are here want to come with digital bank solution, talk to me right away, because we are getting into that area. But nevertheless, we have a country which is very much centralized. Like everything is centralized towards the capital, and out of that, almost 90% of the country is actually in very much, I would say, disconnected. So a lot of people actually depend on the mobile financial services. And this is a very interesting case we have. Let me just share a story with you. Like I was saying that we are the Silicon Valley for social business, right? So there is an organization called BRAC, and BRAC is the largest NGO in the world, and they have a huge network of microcredit services. So they have a bank, they have a traditional bank as well. On top of that, they actually, on the microcredit network, they have established the MFS network. So now they become the world's one of the leading MFS services called bKash, and which was actually founded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as well. So this has become a problem solver for many of the rural people, because they don't understand all this documentation. They don't have the trust. There are cultural hurdles, because we're Islamic country. They think the interest and all that, that's where it's bad. It's taboo. They shouldn't go to bank. So the MFS services have become very much easy lifeguard for them. See, and for these people, they do a lot of transactions through MFS, and there are a lot of immigrants living abroad, and they're also sending the money through these channels. So once we actually step into the digital banking, that's another change of lifestyle for them, because then they can actually start the depositing and the lending, and all other banking facilities can come in. So that's where we feel that the digital bank will enhance their lifestyle in a great deal. A funny story, if I may share with you. So like during the Hari Hajj, we have the cattle markets, right? And for the years and years, the cattle market has been traded through all hard cash. After pandemic, we had a very cashless society in all the cattle markets. So this was something very new. And these people who came from rural area, they didn't have to carry a bundle of cash and go back to the villages. They were just sending the cash in and out. So this was a huge change for them. But nevertheless, when there is lack of literacy, there needs to be a lot of awareness, and all that needs to be there to educate them. Otherwise, there can be a lot of disasters as well. So, yeah.
Ahmed, I feel like this speaks particularly to your expertise. What are the advantages here with digital banking in comparison to sort of classical banking, particularly in the scenario where he's, segregation and accessibility? What do we see the benefits to be?
Good morning, everyone, first, and thank you for the question. I'd like to answer this question in a way which is a little bit different, if you allow me. Banks, if you speak about banks, you remember right away regulations, you remember compliance, you remember AML, you remember KYC, you remember internal controls. And when you remember this, you don't feel good. You feel that it's highly regulated environment. But when you speak about fintechs, you see nice pictures on LinkedIn, you see nice people, you see young people, you see a nice vibe. So what we are trying to do here is trying to make two different personalities friends, or at least to work together, and that's not easy. And this is the power or the game of power which is going on now. Fintechs, a few years ago when I was working at Visa, the biggest risk from banking perspective was the transactions revenue, because fintechs came and started to take like P2P transactions, started to jump a little bit to small payments and things like that. And then a few years ago came the buy now, pay later players and the rent now, pay later players, and they started to eat from the bank's revenue when it comes to the second largest revenue generator for them, which is loans. So that's another risk. So they have to become friends, of course, and this bridge has to, or this gap has to be bridged, but it's not that easy. I think what we're gonna see in the next 2 to 3 years is something that no one can predict easily. I see some fintechs now, and I think, guys, you have seen some fintechs being valued at value bigger than banks, and they started only 2-3 years ago. And some digital banks, and especially in Europe, they are very successful, and mainly in the UK and Brazil, for example, they are super successful, and their value is much bigger than traditional banks who were in the business for 60 years and 50 years. And we have seen even traditional banks being sold at $1 without mentioning names. So the environment which we are living now in the fintech and banking industry is very confusing to a lot of us. However, in my opinion, banks need help. Imagine anyone here, imagine you are an employee and you are getting a nice salary. And there is a personal coach watching you, and they know that you have a potential to get much better salary or to get much better future. But you think that you don't need help because you are getting good salary and you are paying for your mortgage and you are paying for your kids' school and you are doing everything fine. However, your potential is unlocked. This is actually, in my opinion, the problem with the banking industry. The banking industry is still making great money, still making great profit. Like what George said at the beginning, they are helping governments. They are supported by governments. There is interest in the both sides. So they will continue to get help and they continue to get support from central banks. But at a certain point of time, they will raise their hands and they say, we need help. So I think the help will come from fintechs, will come from advisory services, will come from new technologies. And the bank which is brave enough to say, I really need help and I need some support from new players, from someone who did it better than me before, this is the bank which will go places. And we have seen that in many banks in the region. Many banks are really pioneering in the technology and the digital age. And even they are becoming better than digital banks. If you look at some digital banks, there are some traditional banks have much better platform now and much better interface and UX, UI, and back end better than digital banks while they are traditional banks. I'll stop here because I can continue about this, talk about this for 2 hours. Thank you.
Thank you. I think what we're seeing on this panel is the repetition of the need for collaboration. And I'm going to come back to you in relation to collaboration in a second. But Pavan, could you talk about the technology that facilitates this collaboration and sort of the role you're playing in that?
Good morning, everyone. Absolutely. I do believe that whatever co-panelists talk about the coexistence of fintechs and banks, and I do have a very same opinion on that. And technology is basically playing very crucial role for banks. Okay, but what will be the speed of getting that technology for the banks? That is quite important. Whereas the fintechs are completely like they are disrupting the market with their innovations, the technology that they do have. This is not a race between elephant and rabbit. Okay, I would say that both of them are having their own ways, own path, and they will continue to flourish. But when we say that how they will collaborate and where will be the opportunities, banks collaborating with the fintechs, that is very important to see. So, for example, banks are massive. They cannot take that speed. So what will be the opportunity they can collaborate? So one is basically whatever areas that bank is operating in. So one is, for example, saying that branchless banking or doorstep banking. Something very innovative products and ideas that are coming from the fintech, which banks can utilize as an technology services to reach to the people who are not banked, who are not included in the banking as of now. So, it's not just about the people who are already in the banking process, who are already banking, but reaching out to the people who are, looking for financial inclusion, looking for the banking services to be provided, especially in the countries, for example, Africa or in Asia, where a large number of population is still unbanked. Okay, so this could be the great collaboration between the fintechs and banks to banks can scale up the speed of their transformation, digitalization with the help of fintechs. So one example that I live in India and I have seen basically how these banks in India have done the digital transformation in last 7 to 10 years. It has been a massive transformation, not just for private sector banks, but public sector banks as well. So all public sector banks are almost like, all of them are completely digital nowadays. All of them are having branchless banking, doorstep banking, mobile banking. So is basically role of government that is played in peer-to-peer banking. Okay. So what happened basically? Not all of them are having become technology company. Banks are not become technology company. Rather, they have done the collaborations with the services providers or basically fintech companies where they see basically possibilities of collaborating and moving ahead. Many times they acquired the fintechs. Many times they did the tie-ups with them and created some very innovative solutions using the collaborative programs where banks come with their case studies, with their problem statements, and gave opportunity to the fintechs to solve that problems, and then coming back to them and using that technology to reach out to the people. So there are many opportunities that lies between fintechs and banks to collaborate. So for example, in Africa, what I do see that banks are still doing a lot more traditional banking way. They are still large number population is not is part of their banking services. Although the fintechs like Safaricom, for example, M-Pesa has great reach. Everybody is using the M-Pesa and Safaricom. Even they are not having the bank accounts. Why basically that kind of situation has come where banks are not reaching out to them and a fintech is already there. So there is these kind of are the gaps basically that bank also need to find it out and find the collaborative approach to reach out to them, add more and more people into their portfolios, and not just basically financial inclusion but also managing the wealth, investment portfolios. All that basically banks can take help from the fintechs in streamlining and increasing their profits, efficiencies, productivities, a lot more things.
Thank you. Sim, I'm going to come back to you here, particularly with your wealth of experience. When we talk about the collaboration and the need for collaboration and the role innovation is going to play, the closing of branches and accessibility, whose responsibility is it to facilitate this process between fintech, banking, and the collaboration? Because we're sticking on bridging the divide.
I think the market will facilitate that very easy, and the consumer. And we see already today a lot of consolidation and segmentation in banking. So there are a lot of banks who will already not onboard customers who are less with a deposit of $1 or $5 million. So that is already segmentation. If you go to Europe or to Swiss banks, they will say, if you want to bank with me, it's a minimum $1 million or $5 million. There are even banks in Switzerland around with 20 million. So, and I talk here about dollars. And even if you go here in Dubai, let's stay here locally, you want to open a corporate or private individual account. There are a lot of banks, they have some conditions. They will tell you, if you bank with us, the minimum is $1 million dirham to start with. If you don't maintain, then we will charge you a special fee or a maintenance fee or service fee. And that is the solution for a lot of other banks coming, like neobanks, like EMIs, we call them in Europe, electronic money institutions, who will be serving the smaller customers who are, let's say, less than 1 million or less than a certain amount. And then you have the PSPs, the payment processing companies, who are processing just for the purpose of businesses, their in and outs. And of course, you have the exchanges who are coming now, where you can exchange online, not only between the fiat currencies, also from fiat into crypto and the other way around. So today we will see definitely a segmentation, a consolidation in the banking. And we will have more specialized banks than these global universal banks we have in place. This will be sooner or later off.
Diota, I think this goes back to what you were speaking about earlier. How can these banks sort of foster an ecosystem of collaboration? You've given some examples, and I sort of wanted you to expand on that because I think it ties into what we're talking about now.
Yeah, so collaboration is required because when you think about segmentation, right? Swiss banks are looking at $20 million and above, $5 million and above. I'm looking at 20 million rupiah and below, 5 million rupiah and below. which is there's a 15,000 kind of like multiplier, right? But the thing is, it's very difficult for me because like even though I am a new bank, a digital bank, my license is a bank. All the compliance issues, KYC, AML, all those words that give me a headache, I need to do, right? But what that means is you need help or I need help. For example, so we have a partnership with Alphamart, as I already mentioned, 20,000 locations. We also already have a partnership with an agency-based business, right? Which means they leverage people to sell goods and services, and we tap on top of that to sell financial services. They have 300,000 agents, right? We also connect with a payments company. So before recently, whereby the central bank reduced the transfer fees were a little bit high, around 50 cents US for any given transaction. And if you're doing small transactions, 50 cents US is a little bit much, right? So these companies do domestic remittances for a fraction of the cost. We partner with them because they also need a balance sheet. They also need a source of lending, right? So in order for you to be able to serve the customer segment that you want, sometimes you have to think about ways to serve them in, number one, a more sustainable way, because I think if you think about technology, the days whereby I can burn as much money as I want is gone. I have to be a little bit more prudent nowadays. But number two is also creating a very strong use case, stickiness, right? I think the previous panel said, there's very little loyalty nowadays. Well, you have to give them a reason to be loyal, right? If you know they go to a certain supermarket to buy their groceries, then partner with that grocery store. If you know that they use a certain payments provider to do domestic remittances or international remittances, then you work with that remittance provider, right? So I think that's key, right? And collaboration is not only between banks and fintechs, right? It's also banks with my larger banks, right? So we have maybe $500 million in assets, very modest. So sometimes banks that have, tens of billions of dollars in assets, they come to me and say, hey, Diota, you target these people. I don't have the capabilities to do so. How about I bankroll you? So they provide me a loan so I can lend it out to my segment. So collaboration happens across the board. And I think that's the only way going forward. Because customers are getting smarter. They know what they want. They're very picky. With social media and like smartphone penetration, information is just flowing to them, right? So you can't fool them as you were able to do maybe like 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, I think the point of collaboration, which has come up quite a bit, has proven to be really important. And I definitely think, reflective of what you guys have said, it's the direction things are going. I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
I think the discussion is warming up very nicely. So thank you. Okay. Just building on what Toyota just said now, I want to continue with this story, if you allow me. 100%. There is no loyalty anymore for banks or for anything. I was just managing, until December 2023, I was managing a loyalty company, which is the Entertainer. And through many surveys and many questionnaires, people are now kind of just loyal to their football club, if I may say. Almost nothing else. This is the only thing which maybe you don't change. Anything else, maybe you are open to change, especially your bank. So to your point, I agree 100%. It's you have to give something to get something now. You have to give great service. You have to give great rates. You have to give savings. You have, and it's not easy. And you cannot do that alone. The bank can never do that alone anymore. The bank will need a player which is doing the domestic transfer at fractions. And the domestic transfer player will need the bank to rely on the things which we all love, like the KYC and the controls and the internal controls and the compliance. So actually, they have to hide or they have to work with the bank to cover for all of this. So everyone will need the other one, but the question mark is who will need the other party more and who will raise his hand more, like when he was saying we needed help. This is great. It's very rare to see a CEO of a bank saying I need help. Usually it doesn't go nicely and easy in public to say I need help, while this is very normal. Banks will need help with technology, Banks will need help with the way they are working. Banks will need help with the AI. Banks will need help with information, with data. Banks will need help to get real-time dashboards. Banks will need help to optimize their revenue. Banks will need help to cut their costs. Banks will need help in everything. And this is very normal. I think my final answer to your question is whoever will not ask for help or will not seek help, and I don't mean help by just help from consulting firms or things like that, but just partnerships, collaboration. And these banks, I think, will be very difficult to be competitive in the future.
I think that one of the important themes that came up, not only in conjunction with collaboration, was help. And I was actually coming to, I don't want to get your name wrong, Armand, because I think that, and we are almost done, I think that you highlighted the importance of digital finance, where you're from, and the need there in terms of what is needed to facilitate that process. I mean, we're sitting up here with banking, with digital finance, with banking and technology. What is the need to ensure that happens and it happens easily?
Since we have a time constraint, in a nutshell, I would
20
say,
seconds.
yeah, solid ecosystem. And when we say solid ecosystem, that means we need to have super RegTech in place. The open API, whatever we're talking about, needs to be in a secure channel, all that. The AI-driven CRM, RPA, all those components should be there, aligned. It's like a solar system for it to go like that. And other thing is like keeping this ecosystem totally into the context, there needs to be solid integrity as well. Otherwise, the digital bank can go border after border anywhere. So there needs to be that framework to be in place.
Thank you. And before we go, I just want to, Bhavan, if you had any final comments before we wrapped up.
I will keep it less than 20. So, what he was saying, so I do agree. Like, see, it's not just for the banks to basically, think from the perspective, they need to serve the customers and do the transactions, but they also need to increase the operational efficiencies. They need to increase the customer value propositions, and that is something that is very, very important. And how that will be done, that will all done with the technology, with the help of technology. Okay, be it the AI, be it the blockchain, be it the normal simple reports, or any kind of system that does help them to get the real-time correct data, so that the decision making that they are doing is the accurate and is in time bounded. Okay, and that is the key factor that every banks has to at least keep it very simple, but make something that is very, very concrete.
I think in conclusion, sorry we didn't open the floor up to ask questions, but these gentlemen, we're gonna have the doors locked so that you could assault them with any questions you may have. I think as we conclude, we could appreciate that in bridging the gap, it's the acknowledgement of the role all parties play, the role banking plays in the ecosystem, the role fintech plays in the ecosystem, the role technology plays. And in us looking forward at bridging the gap, we want to look at collaboration. So we just want to thank these experts for sharing with us today. And like I said, we'll lock the door so you can speak to them after.